Are you absolutely certain that what you call confidence is anything more than a mask you were taught to wear so that others would not sense the quiet tremor living inside your decisions, the silent hunger guiding your fears, the invisible leash pulling your behavior toward approval, safety, and belonging rather than toward power? Because true confidence does not announce itself, it does not posture, it does not plead for validation, it does not glow, it does not inspire applause. True confidence is colder than that, quieter, heavier. It walks through rooms without needing to be noticed, yet rearranges the gravity of every person inside. It does not ask permission to exist. It does not explain itself. It does not justify its hunger. It simply moves, and the world shifts to accommodate it, even when the world does not understand why. The truly confident are not loud. They are precise. They are not emotional. They are intentional. They are not fearless. They are disciplined in their fear. And above all, they possess a single trait that eclipses all others, a trait so misunderstood that it is rarely named, rarely taught, and almost never recognized in real time. It is the ability to remain internally sovereign while externally compliant, to obey without surrendering, to appear agreeable while staying unowned, to walk within systems without being psychologically claimed by them. This is the trait Machiavelli understood before the world had language for it. This is the trait he wrote between the lines, the trait he embedded into his warnings, his cold advice, his unsentimental truths about men and power and survival. It is not dominance. It is not charm. It is not charisma. It is not intelligence. It is not even courage. It is something far more dangerous and far more rare. It is psychological independence. Not rebellion, not defiance, not arrogance, but independence at the level of inner authority, the ability to make your own meaning, your own judgment, your own hierarchy of value, regardless of the emotional gravity of those around you. The ability to be unmoved while appearing moved. The ability to hear approval without being softened by it. The ability to feel threat without shrinking beneath it. The ability to be surrounded by louder wills and still remain inwardly untouched, like a silent mountain beneath passing storms. Most people do not live this way. Most people do not even realize that they are living under an invisible regime of borrowed beliefs, borrowed fears, borrowed desires. Their confidence is conditional. It depends on praise, position, acceptance, security, status, and certainty. Remove any one of these and the mask cracks. Their posture collapses. Their voice softens. Their opinions become negotiable. Their identity bends. They think they are confident because they can speak in meetings, post on social media, assert boundaries in safe environments, and recite self-help mantras. But their sense of self is still owned by the emotional economy around them. They are not sovereign. They are leased. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He saw that most men live as tenants inside other men's expectations. He saw that their morality is inherited, their ambition borrowed, their courage conditional. He saw that when pressure rises, they do not return to themselves. They return to their conditioning. They obey their fears. They betray their long-term interests for short-term relief. They surrender their will in exchange for safety. And they call this compromise. They call this realism. They call this wisdom. But the truly confident man does not negotiate with his core. He may bend his behavior. He may soften his words. He may adapt his strategies. He may wear the costume of agreement when the room requires it. But inwardly, he remains untouched. His center does not shift. His values do not dissolve. His long-term direction does not collapse under social gravity. He is not moved by approval. He is not crushed by rejection. He is not defined by success. He is not erased by failure. This is what makes him terrifying to systems built on emotional control, because systems do not fear strength. They can absorb strength. They can redirect it. They can reward it. They can punish it. But they cannot own a mind that has withdrawn its need for validation. They cannot command a soul that has severed its dependence on external permission. They cannot intimidate someone who has already accepted his own solitude. This is the trait that turns a man into a long-term threat to short-term power. Machiavelli understood that most rulers lose not because they are weak, but because they are emotionally owned. They are enslaved by applause. They are seduced by flattery. They are softened by loyalty. They are destabilized by criticism. They mistake comfort for security. They mistake familiarity for stability. They mistake kindness for safety. And slowly, invisibly, their decisions begin to serve their emotional needs rather than their strategic interests. They begin to protect their image instead of their position. They begin to preserve their reputation instead of their leverage. They begin to chase approval instead of shaping outcomes. And by the time they realize they have become dependent on the crowd already owns them. True confidence does not ask to be loved. It does not need to be liked. It does not need to be understood. It does not need to be celebrated. It does not need to be forgiven. It does not even need to be right in the eyes of others. It needs only one thing: internal coherence. A spine that does not curve when emotional weather changes. A compass that does not spin when voices grow loud. A will that does not fragment when pressure rises. This is why the truly confident often appear colder than they are, because they do not emotionally outsource their decisions. They feel deeply, but they do not allow feeling to govern their long-term direction. They are not numb, they are regulated, they are not detached, they are contained. Their emotions are not their masters, their emotions are their instruments. And this is where most people misunderstand them. They think the truly confident are arrogant. They think they are aloof. They think they are distant. They think they are unfeeling. They mistake self-possession for indifference. They mistake restraint for superiority. They mistake internal discipline for lack of empathy. But what they are actually witnessing is independence. A man who does not need their reaction to validate his direction. A man who does not need their approval to legitimize his ambition. A man who does not need their understanding to proceed. A man who does not emotionally kneel before the social field he is moving through. Machiavelli did not teach cruelty for its own sake. He taught immunity. He taught insulation. He taught the art of remaining psychologically sovereign in environments designed to extract your will and replace it with obedience disguised as morality, loyalty, and civility. Because power does not conquer you by force. It conquers you by shaping what you are allowed to want, what you are allowed to fear, what you are allowed to believe about yourself. The truly confident person is dangerous because he has withdrawn his inner consent from that invisible contract. He may obey laws, he may follow procedures, he may appear cooperative, but he does not internalize the emotional authority of the system. He does not adopt its fears as his own. He does not adopt its limitations as truth. He does not adopt its rewards as his primary motivation. His ambition does not depend on what is currently permitted. His identity does not depend on what is currently acceptable. His direction does not depend on what is currently rewarded. This is the trait that allows a person to think 10 years ahead while others are negotiating tomorrow's comfort. This is the trait that allows someone to walk away from applause without shrinking. This is the trait that allows someone to be misunderstood without becoming small. This is the trait that allows someone to be alone without becoming desperate. It is the quiet refusal to emotionally kneel, and it is the rarest trait in the modern world. Because modern systems are not built on chains, they are built on validation loops. They reward you when you conform. They punish you when you deviate. They feed you when you perform. They starve you when you resist. They teach you to associate belonging with obedience and isolation with danger. And over time, most people surrender their inner authority without ever realizing they did. They do not lose their freedom through force. They trade it for comfort. They trade it for safety. They trade it for certainty. They trade it for applause. The truly confident person does not make that trade. He may accept the rewards. He may use the systems. He may navigate the structures. But he does not psychologically belong to them. He remains internally unowned. This is why he is patient, because he is not in a hurry to be approved. This is why he is calm, because his nervous system is not being pulled by social gravity. This is why he is decisive, because his choices are not diluted by fear of reaction. This is why he is strategic, because he can think long-term without emotional interference. This is why Machiavelli warned that men who are loved too much often fall harder than those who are feared. Love creates dependency. Fear creates clarity. But independence creates invulnerability. Not invulnerability to pain, not invulnerability to loss, but invulnerability to psychological capture. And that is the true battlefield, not the battlefield of armies, but the battlefield of inner authority. The battlefield of who defines your reality. The battlefield of who owns your emotional center. The battlefield of who decides what you fear, what you value, what you pursue, and what you tolerate. The truly confident person has already claimed this territory inside himself. He has already chosen his values. He has already accepted his solitude. He has already made peace with misunderstanding. He has already detached his worth from applause. He has already decided that his direction will not be negotiated by comfort, And because of that, he walks differently, he speaks differently, he chooses differently, he waits differently, he resists differently, he loses differently, he wins differently. He does not need to dominate rooms, because rooms do not dominate him. He does not need to manipulate everyone because he is not psychologically manipulable. He does not need to prove himself because his worth is not externally administered. He does not need to rush because his direction is not dependent on immediate validation. He does not need to cling because he has already accepted what it costs to be sovereign. This is the trait Machiavelli respected above all others. Not cruelty, not ambition, not cunning, but inner sovereignty, the quiet, disciplined, ruthless independence of mind that allows a person to walk through power structures without being owned by them, to benefit from systems without worshipping them, to cooperate without surrendering, to obey without kneeling. This is the foundation of real confidence, not loudness, not charisma, not certainty, but the silent refusal to let your inner world be governed by anything outside your will. And once you understand this, once you feel it settle into your bones, once you realize how rarely it exists around you, you begin to see the world differently. You begin to see how many people are not living their lives, but negotiating their fear. You begin to see how many leaders are not leading, but managing their approval. You begin to see how many ambitions are not real, but inherited. And you begin to realize something unsettling. The most powerful people in the room are often the quietest ones. Because their decisions are not owned, their identities are not leased, their wills are not borrowed. Their confidence does not come from the world. It comes from the fact that the world does not own their inner throne. And that changes everything. And once you begin to see this inner sovereignty, once your eyes adjust to its silhouette, you also begin to notice something far more unsettling beneath the surface of ordinary life. You begin to see the invisible economy of fear, approval, and dependency moving through conversations, workplaces, families, institutions, friendships, and even love itself. You begin to see how people barter fragments of their will in exchange for belonging, how they sell pieces of their future for immediate comfort, how they slowly mortgage their inner authority to avoid the pain of standing alone. You begin to understand that the world is not divided between the powerful and the powerless, but between the internally sovereign and the emotionally owned. Machiavelli would have recognized this immediately in the way men bowed their spines before kings, in the way courtiers laughed too quickly, in the way advisors filtered their truths, in the way soldiers obeyed orders they knew were wrong because, say, obedience felt safer than solitude. He would have recognized it in the way merchants flattered, in the way priests moralized, in the way citizens whispered in corners and roared in crowds. He would have recognized the ancient machinery of psychological ownership, the quiet transfer of inner authority from the individual to the structure, from the soul to the system, from the will to the collective. And he would have known that once this transfer occurs, true confidence becomes impossible. Because confidence is not a posture, it is not a tone of voice, it is not a style of clothing or a way of walking. It is not something that can exist in a mind that has surrendered its inner throne. It cannot grow in soil that has already been claimed by external permission. It cannot breathe in a nervous system trained to wait for approval before moving. This is why so many people appear confident and yet collapse under pressure. This is why their voices shake when confronted, why their convictions dissolve when challenged, why their values shift when incentives change. They are not weak. They are unsovereign. Their center of gravity lives outside of them, and anything that moves the external world moves them. The truly confident do not live this way. Their nervous systems are trained differently. Their inner architecture is built differently. They do not ask the room what they are allowed to be. They do not ask the system what they are allowed to want. They do not ask authority what they are allowed to think. They have already answered those questions privately, long before they step into public spaces. They have already decided what matters, what does not, what they will sacrifice, and what they will not. Their direction is not discovered in conversation. It is carried into conversation. This is where Machiavelli's philosophy becomes uncomfortable for modern ears, because it does not flatter the idea of universal goodness or emotional harmony. It does not pretend that the world rewards sincerity. It does not comfort the fragile belief that being morally pleasing guarantees safety. It speaks instead to a darker, colder truth, that most structures are built to extract compliance, not to cultivate sovereignty, and that the man who wishes to remain internally free must learn to walk through these structures without letting them colonize his inner world. The truly confident person does not rebel constantly, because rebellion still allows the system to define your emotional center. He does not posture against authority, because posturing still seeks recognition. He does not define himself by opposition, because opposition is still dependency in disguise. Instead, he becomes psychologically invisible, while remaining strategically visible. He allows his behavior to be interpreted, while his inner authority remains inaccessible. He becomes unreadable not by hiding, but by not emotionally investing his identity into the social theater around him. He can be praised without swelling. He can be criticized without shrinking. He can be rewarded without softening. He can be threatened without surrendering. His internal compass does not spin when external winds change direction. His sense of self is not negotiable. This is what makes him unsettling to those who live emotionally owned lives. Because, when you live dependent on validation, you instinctively recognize someone who does not need what you need. And that recognition creates fear. Not conscious fear, but a subtle tension, a quiet unease, a sense that this person cannot be easily influenced, cannot be easily managed, cannot be easily controlled. This is why truly confident people are often described as intimidating without trying to be, not because they are aggressive, but because they do not emotionally bend. Their presence disrupts the invisible hierarchy of need. They do not look up to approval. They do not look down at disapproval. They stand level, internally unmoved, and this destabilizes systems built on emotional leverage. Machiavelli understood that the most powerful leverage over a person is not money, not threat, not punishment, not reward, but emotional dependency. The need to be seen, the need to be liked, the need to be accepted, the need to belong, the need to feel safe inside someone else's rules. Once these needs govern your decisions, your freedom is already compromised. Your strategy becomes reactive. Your ambition becomes cautious. Your truth becomes filtered. Your life becomes a negotiation rather than a direction. The truly confident person has already paid the price of independence. He has already accepted that he may be misunderstood. He has already accepted that he may be alone. He has already accepted that his values may cost him opportunities. He has already accepted that his direction may make him inconvenient. He has already accepted that his inner authority may make him incompatible with certain rooms, certain systems, certain hierarchies. And because he has already paid this price, he is no longer vulnerable to emotional blackmail. He cannot be threatened with isolation because he has already befriended solitude. He cannot be threatened with misunderstanding because he has already accepted being misread. He cannot be threatened with rejection because he has already detached his worth from belonging. He cannot be threatened with discomfort because he has already chosen long-term direction over short-term relief. This is why Machiavelli warned that men who are emotionally soft are politically fragile. Not because softness is evil, but because softness without sovereignty becomes leverage. Compassion without independence becomes a liability. Loyalty without self-ownership becomes a chain. The truly confident person is not cruel. He is not heartless, but he is insulated. He does not allow his emotions to be used as levers. He does not allow his empathy to be weaponized. He does not allow his need for belonging to be turned into obedience. This is where most people falter. They want to be confident without becoming independent. They want to feel strong without paying the psychological price of sovereignty. They want the posture without the solitude, the self-esteem without the self-rule, the admiration without the internal discipline. They want the appearance of confidence while remaining emotionally dependent. And so they become what Machiavelli would have recognized immediately: performative, fragile, reactive, easily swayed, easily manipulated, easily owned. Their confidence works in safe environments. It collapses in hostile ones. It functions among friends. It dissolves among rivals. It feels real when rewarded. It disappears when challenged. It is a costume, not a core. The truly confident person does not wear confidence. He is structured by it. His nervous system does not spike at disapproval. His breathing does not shallow at confrontation. His thinking does not fragment under pressure. His sense of self does not flicker when authority speaks loudly. His center does not move. This does not make him fearless. It makes him regulated. He still feels fear. He still feels doubt. He still feels uncertainty. But he does not outsource his direction to these feelings. He does not allow emotional weather to steer his long-term trajectory. He uses his feelings as data, not as commanders. And this is the difference between emotional strength and emotional sovereignty. Emotional strength allows you to endure discomfort. Emotional sovereignty allows you to remain self-directed thin discomfort. Machiavelli would have seen that men who possess emotional sovereignty become dangerous in a very specific way. Not violently dangerous, but strategically dangerous. They are not easily herded. They are not easily bribed. They are not easily flattered. They are not easily frightened. They do not rush into decisions to relieve discomfort. They do not abandon long-term advantage for short-term emotional relief. They can wait while others panic. They can remain still while others scramble. They can withhold while others beg. They can walk away while others cling. They are not faster. They are steadier. They are not louder. They are quieter. They are not more aggressive. They are more anchored. And because of this, they become the long game in a world obsessed with short-term reactions. They become the silent gravitational center around which reactive people orbit. They become the ones who can endure long winters of obscurity without shrinking. They become the ones who can tolerate misunderstanding without softening. They become the ones who can sit with uncertainty without collapsing. They become the ones who can build empires quietly while others perform strength loudly. This is the trait that allows someone to outlast louder competitors, not by dominating them, but by not needing them. Not by crushing them, but by not being crushed by their opinions. Not by silencing them, but by not being governed by their reactions. And this is where Machiavelli's philosophy becomes deeply personal, because he is not merely speaking about princes and states. He is speaking about the architecture of the human will. He is speaking about who owns your inner world. He is speaking about whether your life is governed by your direction or by your fears. The truly confident person does not measure his worth by applause. He measures his life by alignment with his chosen direction. He does not live for recognition. He lives for coherence. He does not chase comfort. He chooses meaning. He does not seek validation. He seeks internal consistency. He is not immune to pain. He is immune to psychological capture. And this is what makes his presence heavy, even when he is quiet, because his energy does not seek permission. His decisions do not require applause. His direction does not need to be explained. His life is not a performance. He is not acting strong. He is structured strong. This is why Machiavelli did not trust men who needed to be loved, not because love is weak, but because dependency is. He saw that the man who needs love can be guided by withholding it. He saw that the man who needs approval can be steered by granting or denying it. He saw that the man who needs belonging can be controlled by the threat of exclusion. The truly confident man has already stepped outside of this invisible leash. He does not reject people. He does not reject connection. But he does not allow connection to define his will. He does not allow belonging to determine his direction. He does not allow affection to override his long-term interest. He can be warm without being owned. He can be kind without being soft. He can be open without being manipulable. And this is the paradox that confuses people. They expect the sovereign to be harsh, distant, rigid. But true sovereignty is quieter than that. It is not brittle. It is grounded. It does not announce itself. It does not posture, it simply remains. And because it remains, it endures. Because it endures, it accumulates. Because it accumulates, it becomes power. Not the kind of power that flashes and burns out, but the kind that settles into the structure of reality and reshapes it slowly, patiently, inexorably. This is the power of internal independence. This is the true core of confidence. Not how you appear, but who owns your inner throne. And once you begin to sense this inside yourself, once you begin to notice how often your own decisions are negotiated by fear of reaction, by hunger for approval, by desire for comfort, by avoidance of solitude, you begin to feel the subtle chains you did not know you were wearing. You begin to feel the invisible permissions you are waiting for. You begin to notice the moments where your will hesitates, not because your direction is unclear, but because your courage is being taxed by emotional dependency. And this awareness changes you, because once you see the chains, you cannot unsee them. Once you feel the leash, you cannot pretend it is not there. Once you recognize the difference between acting confident and being sovereign, you begin to crave something deeper than applause. You begin to crave coherence. You begin to crave direction. You begin to crave ownership of your inner world. And that craving is the beginning of a transformation that most people never complete. because it requires you to become emotionally independent before you become externally powerful. It requires you to accept solitude before you gain influence. It requires you to choose your direction before the world agrees with it. It requires you to build your spine before you build your empire. And this is where the real work begins. The real work begins in silence, far from applause, far from permission, far from the emotional marketplace where most people trade fragments of themselves for momentary safety. It begins in the uncomfortable realization that much of what you call your personality has been negotiated into existence, that your fears were trained, that your desires were suggested, that your ambitions were gently redirected by what was rewarded, what was punished, what was praised, and what was ignored. T begins when you recognize that your inner world has been quietly shaped by forces that do not know your name, do not care about your destiny, and do not benefit from your long-term sovereignty. Machiavelli would have smiled at this moment, not kindly, but knowingly, because he understood that the most decisive battles are not fought in public squares or council chambers, but in the private negotiation between your will and your fear. He understood that men lose their kingdoms long before they lose their crowns. They lose them the moment they allow their direction to be dictated by what keeps them comfortable, rather than by what keeps them sovereign. This is where the trait of true confidence begins to reveal its sharper edge. Psychological independence is not passive. It is not merely the absence of dependency. It is an active architecture of inner authority. It is a daily discipline of choosing your direction even when your nervous system begs you to choose relief instead. It is the refusal to allow discomfort to become your master. It is the training of your emotional reflexes so that fear does not hijack your future. Most people do not realize how often their lives are steered by the avoidance of discomfort. They believe they are pursuing happiness, stability, or success, when in reality they are fleeing anxiety, rejection, uncertainty, and isolation. Their decisions are shaped less by vision and more by tension relief. Their lives become a sequence of short-term escapes rather than a long-term construction. Machiavelli understood that a man who is governed by discomfort is already governable, because discomfort is the most easily weaponized emotion. Threaten his safety and he obeys. Threaten his belonging and he conforms. Threaten his reputation and he bends. Threaten his stability and he trades his future for his present. The truly confident person does not eliminate discomfort, he metabolizes it. He trains his nervous system to remain coherent inside tension. He does not flinch when uncertainty enters the room. He does not rush to relieve anxiety by making premature decisions. He does not trade strategic position for emotional comfort. This is why he often appears slow to others, not because he is indecisive, but because he is not emotionally hijacked. He can sit with ambiguity without collapsing into reaction. He can tolerate not knowing without inventing certainty. He can endure pressure without surrendering his long-term direction, and this capacity becomes an invisible advantage. While others are scrambling, he is observing. While others are reacting, he is calculating. While others are trading leverage for relief, he is accumulating position. While others are rushing into alliances out of fear, he is choosing alliances out of strategy. Machiavelli would have recognized this pattern immediately. He saw how men made fatal decisions under emotional pressure. He saw how alliances were formed in panic, how wars were started to relieve humiliation, how laws were written to soothe fear, how betrayals were committed to avoid discomfort. He saw that the emotional economy of a court could be more dangerous than any enemy army, and he saw that the man who could remain internally unmoved while others were emotionally flaring became a gravitational center of power, not because he dominated the room, but because he was not dominated by the room. This is the core of psychological independence. It is the ability to maintain self-direction inside emotional turbulence. It is the ability to keep your compass steady when social weather becomes violent. It is the ability to continue moving toward your chosen horizon while others are running in circles to escape their own fear. The truly confident person is not immune to doubt. He is immune to panic. He does not deny his uncertainty. He simply does not allow it to command him. He does not anesthetize himself. He regulates himself. His inner authority is not a fantasy. It is a practiced state. This is where most people misunderstand confidence. They think it is bravado. They think it is positivity. They think it is self-assurance. But real confidence is much quieter and much darker than that. It is the willingness to remain in psychological cold without flinching. It is the capacity to walk through periods of ambiguity without abandoning your direction. It is the discipline to delay gratification, recognition, and comfort in service of long-term sovereignty. And this is why true confidence cannot be taught quickly. It is not a motivational speech. It is not an affirmation. It is not a posture you adopt. It is an identity you construct through repeated exposure to discomfort without surrender. Machiavelli would have told you that a man who has not tested his will against his fear does not own his will. He only borrows it in safe environments. He may appear strong when conditions are favorable, but he collapses when conditions turn hostile. His confidence is conditional. His sovereignty is rented. The truly confident person has tested himself in psychological winters. He has endured seasons where nothing moved, where recognition did not come, where allies were absent, where outcomes were uncertain. He has stayed coherent in those winters. He has not betrayed his direction to escape them. He has not traded his values to shorten them. He has not rewritten his identity to be accepted out of them. He has remained, and because he has remained, his inner world has hardened into structure. He no longer needs to prove himself, because he has already survived himself. He no longer needs to posture because he has already faced his own fate. He no longer needs to rush because he has already endured waiting. He no longer needs to cling because he has already befriended solitude. This is the internal architecture Machiavelli respected, not the loud man, not the charismatic man, not the beloved man, but the man who could remain internally sovereign when all emotional incentives were pushing him to surrender. This is also why truly confident people often appear emotionally contained. They are not easily excited. They are not easily flattered. They are not easily discouraged. They do not oscillate dramatically between highs and lows. Their nervous system is not swinging violently in response to social stimuli. They are calm not because they are numb, but because they are anchored. Their emotions still exist, but their identity does not ride on them. Their relationships still matter, but their direction does not depend on them. Their outcomes still matter, but their worth does not fluctuate with them. This internal containment makes them unpredictable in a way that is deeply unsettling to emotionally dependent people, because you cannot easily read them. You cannot easily pressure them. You cannot easily seduce them. You cannot easily threaten them. They are not brittle. They do not crack under emotional strain. They do not bend under social gravity. They do not collapse under uncertainty. They remain, and in a world addicted to reaction, remaining becomes a form of power. Machiavelli understood that power is not merely the ability to command others. It is the ability to command yourself. It is not merely the control of territory. It is the control of your own emotional economy. It is not merely influence over people. It is immunity to being emotionally governed by them. This is the difference between someone who occupies a position of power and someone who becomes a gravitational center of power. The first is elevated by systems, the second shapes systems. The first must protect his image. The second does not need one. The first must maintain approval. The second maintains direction. The first must manage perception. The second manages reality. And the truly confident person is always moving quietly toward the second. He is not chasing status. He is building position. He is not reacting to noise. He is tracking signal. He is not trying to be seen. He is preparing to endure. This is why Machiavelli wrote not for the masses, but for those willing to become sovereign in silence. He did not teach comfort. He taught insulation. He did not teach popularity. He taught resilience. He did not teach virtue as ornament. He taught discipline as survival. Because he knew that the man who owns his inner world can outlast empires built on noise. He knew that the man who governs his fear can outmaneuver armies driven by panic. He knew that the man who does not need applause can quietly take the future while others are fighting for the present. This is the deeper current beneath his words, the current of psychological sovereignty. And once you begin to feel this current moving inside you, once you begin to notice how often your own decisions are being negotiated by discomfort, you begin to feel a subtle but irreversible shift. You begin to hesitate before reacting. You begin to sit with tension instead of escaping it. You begin to ask yourself whether your choices are being made by your direction or by your anxiety. You begin to sense where your inner authority has been leased instead of owned. And this awareness is dangerous, Because once you recognize where your sovereignty has been outsourced, you can no longer pretend you are free. Once you see the structure of your own emotional dependencies, you can no longer blame the world for your limitations. Once you feel the difference between reaction and direction, you can no longer confuse activity with power. And slowly, quietly, invisibly, the center of gravity of your life begins to move back inside you, not with fireworks, not with applause, but with a cold, steady clarity. And that clarity is the beginning of something most people never build. The beginning of inner sovereignty, the beginning of real confidence, the beginning of a life that cannot be psychologically owned. Once that clarity settles into your bones, once the gravity of your own authority begins to outweigh the gravity of the room, the world subtly changes its posture around you. Not loudly, not theatrically, but in the quiet mathematics of power, where reactions, hesitations, and unspoken calculations reveal more than declarations ever could. You begin to notice how conversations shift when your approval is no longer your currency, how negotiations stretch when your discomfort no longer controls your timing, how pressure loses its edge when it can no longer find a nervous system willing to panic. Machiavelli would have recognized this transformation immediately. He would have seen the moment a man stops being predictable, the moment his fears no longer map cleanly onto his behavior, the moment his hunger for belonging no longer determines his alliances, the moment his discomfort no longer dictates his speed, because predictability is the skeleton key of control, and when your emotional reflexes no longer follow the patterns others expect, you quietly remove yourself from the machinery of manipulation. This is where the deeper architecture of true confidence becomes visible. It is not merely about inner calm. It is about becoming strategically unreadable. It is about learning to withhold your emotional signatures so that others cannot reverse engineer your motives. It is about cultivating a psychological opacity that prevents your fears, your hopes, your needs, and your thresholds from becoming leverage. Most people broadcast their emotional architecture constantly. Their reactions reveal their boundaries. Their tone reveals their hunger. Their defensiveness reveals their wounds. Their excitement reveals their attachments. They are emotionally transparent and therefore strategically naked. They do not need to be studied, they need only to be watched. Machiavelli understood that transparency is not virtue in a competitive world. It is vulnerability. It is a map of your nervous system handed to anyone willing to read it. It is an open blueprint of what pressures you, what soothes you, what motivates you, and what frightens you. The truly confident person does not become deceptive in the crude sense. He becomes contained. He becomes selective. He becomes intentional with his emotional disclosures. He does not lie compulsively. He simply does not broadcast his inner architecture. He does not give away his leverage. He does not expose his thresholds. He does not reveal what moves him most deeply, not because he is hiding, but because he is sovereign. His inner world is not public property. This containment creates a quiet asymmetry in every interaction. While others are readable, he remains partially opaque. While others reveal their emotional economy, he keeps his private. While others negotiate from exposed nerves, he negotiates from internal structure. This asymmetry becomes power, because power is not only about what you can do, it is about what others cannot do to you. And one of the most powerful immunities you can develop is immunity to emotional extraction, immunity to being rushed, immunity to being cornered by discomfort, immunity to being softened by praise, immunity to being bent by fear. Machiavelli warned that men are most vulnerable when their emotional needs are visible, because visible need invites exploitation. Visible hunger invites manipulation. Visible fear invites coercion. Visible attachment invites pressure. The truly confident person may feel all of these things, but he does not leak them into the field. He does not wear his nervous system on his sleeve. He does not turn his inner weather into public data. He understands that his emotional economy is part of his strategic infrastructure. And this is why he often appears calm, even in conflict. Not because he is unaffected, but because he is contained. His reactions are not automatic. His emotions do not spill. His nervous system does not dictate his behavior. He chooses his responses rather than being driven by them. This makes him dangerous in environments where others rely on emotional contagion to shape outcomes. He does not catch panic easily. He does not absorb hysteria. He does not mirror chaos. He does not escalate because others escalate. He becomes a stabilizing force in unstable systems. and stabilizing forces quietly attract gravity. People begin to orient around him, not because he demands it, but because his presence reduces noise, because his presence reduces uncertainty, because his presence does not amplify chaos, because his presence does not leak fear. This is how inner sovereignty becomes external influence, not through dominance but through coherence, not through volume but through gravity, not through force but through steadiness. Machiavelli saw that men who could remain emotionally insulated became the natural centers of decision-making. They became the ones others waited for. They became the ones others consulted. They became the ones others watched. Because when your nervous system is not flaring, you become a point of reference. And once you become a point of reference, you quietly accumulate influence. This is the deeper mechanism beneath leadership, not command, but psychological gravity. The truly confident person does not need to control rooms. He changes their temperature. He does not dominate conversations. He alters their pace. He does not silence opposition. He outlasts it. He does not intimidate. He destabilizes emotional leverage. He does not rush. He waits until the emotional weather of the room has exhausted itself. And then he moves. This is where Machiavelli's cold realism becomes precise. He did not teach speed. He taught timing. He did not teach aggression. He taught patience. He did not teach loudness. He taught endurance. Because he understood that most people exhaust themselves emotionally long before they exhaust their opponent strategically. They burn out in reaction. They reveal their hunger. They expose their fear. They leak their thresholds. They trade leverage for relief. And the truly confident person simply remains. He lets their emotional energy spend itself. He lets their reactions reveal their boundaries. He lets their pressure betray their needs. He lets their urgency expose their weakness. And when the field has revealed itself, he moves with precision. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is the clarity that comes from not being emotionally owned. This is why Machiavelli's teachings feel dark to those who live in emotional dependency. Because they remove the comforting illusion that sincerity protects you. They remove the fantasy that being morally pleasing guarantees safety. They remove the belief that transparency creates security. They expose a colder truth that sovereignty requires insulation, and insulation requires containment. Not emotional suppression, but emotional ownership. Not numbness, but regulation. Not hiding, but discipline. The truly confident person does not become less human. He becomes more structured. He still loves, he still cares, he still feels, but he does not surrender his center. He does not leak his will. He does not trade his direction for belonging. He does not mortgage his future to relieve his present. This is why his presence feels heavy even when he says little. Because his nervous system is not vibrating with need. Because his behavior is not driven by hunger. Because his identity is not dependent on the room. He is not asking to be seen. He is already here. He is not negotiating his worth. He has already decided it. He is not seeking permission. He has already given it to himself. And this creates an aura that people cannot easily name. They call it confidence. But what they are sensing is sovereignty. They are sensing a man who is not emotionally owned. They are sensing a man whose inner throne is not open for negotiation. They are sensing a man whose direction does not wobble under social gravity. They are sensing a man who has already accepted the price of independence. And because he has accepted that price, he no longer fears what others fear. He no longer rushes where others rush. He no longer begs where others beg. He no longer performs where others perform. He no longer collapses where others collapse. He remains, and in remaining he becomes something rare. He becomes stable in a world addicted to reaction. He becomes quiet in a world addicted to noise. He becomes patient in a world addicted to immediacy. He becomes sovereign in a world addicted to permission. This is the deeper engine of power Machiavelli was pointing toward. Not the crown, not the sword, not the army, but the nervous system. The ability to remain internally governed while the world tries to govern you. The ability to keep your inner throne intact while everything around you tries to claim it. The ability to walk through systems without being psychologically absorbed by them. And this is where true confidence stops being an aesthetic and becomes a weapon. A silent one, a patient one, a devastating one. Once you become that silent center, once your nervous system no longer vibrates to the frequency of the room, you begin to feel a separation that is both subtle and profound. It is the feeling of standing inside the same world as everyone else while no longer being psychologically anchored to it. You still participate, you still speak, you still build, you still engage, but your decisions are no longer reflexive echoes of the emotional field around you. They are authored, they are intentional, they are owned. Machiavelli would have called this the difference between living inside fortune and shaping it, between being carried by circumstance and bending circumstance through coherence, because he understood that fate does not yield to strength alone. It yields to those who do not panic when the ground shifts. It yields to those who can remain internally upright while external realities collapse and reform. This is where psychological independence becomes destiny. Most people do not shape their futures. They are shaped by their environments. Their habits are inherited. Their ambitions are suggested. Their fears are installed. Their timelines are quietly chosen for them by what feels safe, what is rewarded, and what seems possible inside the narrow corridor of social permission. They think they are choosing their lives, but they are choosing from menus written by systems that do not care about their sovereignty. The truly confident person does not accept those menus. He writes his own. He does not ask what is possible. He decides what is necessary. He does not ask what is realistic. He chooses what is meaningful. He does not ask what is approved. He commits to what is aligned. This does not make him reckless. It makes him anchored. His anchor is internal, not social. His reference point is internal, not cultural. His compass is internal, not collective. This is why he can endure seasons of invisibility without collapsing into doubt. This is why he can tolerate misunderstanding without rewriting himself. This is why he can hold his dire. While the world rearranges itself around him, he is not waiting for the world to agree with him. He is building a future that will eventually force agreement. Machiavelli understood that men who can endure long arcs of uncertainty become architects of reality, because they are not distracted by noise, they are not seduced by trends, they are not rushed by pressure, they are not softened by comfort. They are moving on timelines that others cannot emotionally tolerate, and time, more than any weapon, reshapes power. This is the deeper advantage of true confidence. It allows you to think in decades while others think in days. It allows you to build structures while others chase moments. It allows you to invest in roots while others decorate branches. The truly confident person is not obsessed with being right today. He is committed to being unavoidable tomorrow. He is not concerned with short-term image. He is constructing long-term position. He is not trying to win arguments. He is building leverage. He is not chasing applause. He is accumulating gravity. This is why Machiavelli's advice feels so merciless to those who live in emotional time. He speaks to those who can live in strategic time, those who can endure delayed reward, those who can tolerate temporary invisibility, those who can walk through winters without betraying their spring. This is where the line between the sovereign and the owned becomes unmistakable. The owned require validation to move. The sovereign move and allow validation to catch up. The owned react to fear. The sovereign metabolize fear. The owned adjust their identity to survive. The sovereign endure to build. The owned negotiate their values to belong. The sovereign accepts solitude to remain whole. This is the architecture of inner sovereignty, and once you build it, you begin to feel an unfamiliar calm. Not the sea, arm of comfort, but the calm of alignment. The calm that comes from not living in contradiction. The calm that comes from not betraying your own direction. The calm that comes from knowing that your actions, your values, and your long-term vision are not at war with each other. This calm is not visible at first. It is felt before it is seen. It lives in your posture, your pace, your tone, your timing. It changes how you enter rooms. It changes how you speak. It changes how you listen. It changes how you wait. People begin to sense that you are not emotionally rushing, that you are not nervously performing, that you are not scanning for approval, that you are not bargaining for belonging. And this unsettles them, because your calm exposes their noise, your patience exposes their panic, your steadiness exposes their volatility, your silence exposes their hunger. They feel this contrast instinctively, even if they cannot articulate it. They begin to orient around you without realizing why. They begin to check your reactions before finalizing their own. They begin to slow their speech in your presence. They begin to seek your approval, not because you demand it, but because your coherence makes their chaos feel small. This is how inner sovereignty becomes social gravity. This is how true confidence becomes influence, not by trying to be powerful, but by becoming internally unowned. Machiavelli understood that power is not something you seize in a moment. It is something you grow into through structure, through discipline, through insulation, through patience, through an identity that is not traded for relief. He understood that men who cannot tolerate solitude cannot tolerate sovereignty. He understood that men who cannot endure uncertainty cannot endure power. He understood that men who cannot regulate their fear cannot regulate others. He understood men who need to be loved cannot afford to lead. And he wrote for those willing to accept this price, not the price of cruelty, but the price of independence. This is why true confidence feels colder than kindness, quieter than charisma, heavier than charm. It is not decoration, it is foundation. It is not performance, it is infrastructure. It does not make you impressive, it makes you inevitable. You become someone whose presence shifts rooms, someone whose timing shapes outcomes, someone whose patience exhausts opponents, someone whose steadiness attracts alliances, someone whose silence invites projection, someone whose direction reshapes reality, not through noise, but through gravity. This is what Machiavelli was pointing toward when he wrote of princes who could survive storms, who could endure exile, who could return after defeats, who could wait for tides to turn, who could move quietly while others burned themselves out in reaction. He was pointing toward men who were not emotionally owned, men whose inner thrones were intact, men whose direction did not collapse under pressure, men who could lose today and still be building tomorrow, men who could be underestimated without becoming small, men who could be unseen without becoming uncertain, men who could be alone without becoming desperate. And once you begin to build this architecture inside yourself, once your nervous system becomes your ally instead of your enemy, once your fear becomes information instead of command, once your solitude becomes space instead of threat, something irreversible begins to happen. You stop needing permission. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop rushing your direction. You stop betraying your long term for your short term. You stop performing your life, and you begin authoring it, quietly, patiently, invisibly, until one day without serum, only, without announcement, without asking for approval, you realize that the world has begun to adjust to you, that your presence is being accounted for, that your absence is being noticed, that your timing is being watched, that your decisions are shaping trajectories beyond your immediate reach. And in that moment, you understand what true confidence has been building all along. Not an image, but inevitability, not attention, but gravity, not applause, but position. And you realize that the most powerful trait of the truly confident was never what they showed the world. It was what they refused to surrender to it. And now you stand at the edge of a truth most people will spend their entire lives circling without ever stepping into. You feel it in the quiet between your thoughts. You feel it in the hesitation that now pauses your reactions. You feel it in the subtle discomfort of knowing that your life has not been governed by your will as fully as you once believed. You feel the invisible architecture of dependency that once felt normal and now feels like a cage. This is not a comfortable realization. It is not meant to be. It is the moment when the old self begins to dissolve. The self that negotiated its future for relief. The self that traded direction for belonging. The self that waited for permission to become real. Machiavelli would have recognized this moment as the true beginning of power. Not when you gain authority. Not when you gain followers. Not when you gain recognition, but when you reclaim your inner throne, because everything else is decoration if your will does not belong to you. You now understand that the world does not rule you by force. It rules you by training your fears, shaping your desires, and rewarding your obedience until your reactions become predictable and your future becomes manageable. You now see how often your own hesitation has not been caution but conditioning. How often your doubt has not been wisdom but inherited fear. How often your limits have not been real but socially installed. This is the quiet prison Machiavelli warned about, and this is the quiet rebellion he respected. Not loud defiance, not emotional outbursts, but internal sovereignty, the refusal to let your nervous system be programmed by anything that does not serve your chosen direction. The refusal to let comfort negotiate your ambition. The refusal to let fear choose your future. The refusal to let belonging define your identity. This is where you either turn back or step forward, because once you have seen the chains, you cannot unknow them. Once you have felt the leash, you cannot pretend it is freedom. Once you have recognized the difference between reaction and direction, you cannot return to unconscious obedience. And so you are faced with a choice that will quietly define the rest of your life. You can return to the warm prison of approval, where your days are safe, your nights are comfortable, your ambitions are polite, your edges are softened, and your inner throne remains leased. Or you can step into the colder air of sovereignty, where your days are demanding, your nights are uncertain, your ambitions are inconvenient, your edges are sharpened, and your inner throne belongs to you. This is not a moral choice, it is a strategic one. The world will not stop rewarding obedience. The world will not stop punishing independence. The world will not stop offering comfort in exchange for your will, and you will be tempted, again and again, to accept those terms. But now you know the price. The price is your direction. The price is your authorship. The price is your gravity. The price is your future. The truly confident do not wait for courage to appear. They build it of repetition. They do not wait for permission. They give it to themselves. They do not wait for certainty. They move with alignment. They do not wait for applause. They move with coherence. They do not wait for safety. They build insulation. They do not wait to be seen. They become inevitable. And now the path is no longer theoretical. It is personal. It lives in every decision you make when fear whispers. It lives in every moment you hesitate to choose your long-term over your short-term. It lives in every time you feel the pull of belonging trying to rewrite your direction. It lives in every urge to trade your authorship for approval. This is where true confidence is forged, not in comfort, not in noise, not in recognition, but in your private refusal to be psychologically owned. This is the work Machiavelli left behind, not as doctrine, but as a mirror that now reflects a question only you can answer. Will you remain emotionally leased, living inside permissions written by others, negotiating your future for relief, calling it safety, calling it realism, calling it wisdom? Or will you reclaim your inner throne, build your sovereignty in silence, metabolize your fear into discipline, and begin authoring a life that does not ask to exist? Because from this moment forward, your reactions will either continue to shape your fate or your direction will. And there is no third path. Choose, and do not choose with words. Choose with the structure of your life. Choose with the discipline of your nervous system. Choose with the patience of your strategy. Choose with the architecture of your days. Choose with the silence of your consistency. Choose with the refusal to kneel inside your own mind. Because the most powerful trait of the truly confident has never been what they show the world. It has always been what they refuse. To surrender to it. And now that you see it, now that you feel its weight, now that you know its cost, you no longer get to pretend you do not hear its call. Build your inner throne. Insulate your will. Withdraw your emotional consent from the machinery that feeds on it. Reclaim your authorship. Harden your direction. Accept your solitude. Outlast your fear. And begin living as something most people will never become: unowned, unmovable, inevitable.